Can I donate on your website? How do I get in contact with you folks besides seeing you on Instagram and social media? So we really look at branding, exposure for your nonprofits and where it is and integrated within your website.
Oh, hello. It's Holly Rustic here with Grant Writing and Funding, and I'm here to help you grow capacity, increase funding, and to advance mission. That might be the work of your nonprofit, or if you're a consultant, nonprofit consultant, or freelance grant writer, all of the different missions that you help with. And to help me do that today, I have Jerry Leon Guerrero here from Aztec. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. And you're also a sponsor of the Nonprofit Consulting Conference coming up in August. So super excited about that. So welcome to the Grant Writing and Funding podcast.
Gosh, thank you, Holly. Thank you very much. I am so excited to be a part of this group. It's been many years. I've been I'm the president and general manager for Aztec, and this year my business Aztec turns 18 years. And I believe out of 15 of those years, I've delved heavily into nonprofit, and I've been part of nonprofits here in Guam. And as you know, right, we live in this tiny island in the Pacific Ocean. And oftentimes people say, oh my goodness, resources, right? We're so far away from everything. Everything gets imported into our island. And so for a long time, we had to be very creative and think out of the box. And sometimes we call it guerrilla marketing, right? And how to really give good exposure to our nonprofits and how we can focus on getting funding and opportunity for a lot of the nonprofits here in Guam. Mm-hmm. And the way I see it over time, over years, it's grown exponentially where, we're able to reach out globally. Yeah. And so I'm very excited today to be part of this group. I'm excited for the conference that's coming up, and I look forward to meeting new people and seeing what we can do to help them and answer any questions.
Yes, and I love that you talked about it from like this small island that we're both on. So yeah, if you guys are listening, you're like, whoa, we are broadcasting from there. World. So definitely we are here on the island, but it might be similar to a lot of your more rural communities as well. Like some of what we're going to be talking about today as far as marketing and going online. Jerry's going to be talking about a lot about websites. And that can be from anywhere in the world, which is beautiful. And I think here on Guam and in many different smaller communities that has connected you now, right, to the world more and giving you more opportunity. So I think that's really important as well to kind of say that. And then also you have a great webinar, is totally free, that we're hosting in a couple of weeks. You guys are going to definitely, if you love what Jerry's talking about today with websites and nonprofits and nonprofit consultants, definitely sign up for that. I have the link in the show notes, so do drop it or grab it there because you're going to be giving more kind of a step-by-step approach and must-haves and don't do's and do's on websites and that sort of thing. So yay! So thanks for doing that as well. I'm really excited about that presentation.
Yes, oftentimes, a lot of folks that are wanting to start up nonprofits, right? They always say, well, why a website, right? This is before social media was at its, now it's like really peaked, right? And so, for many years, we try to explain that, you got to brand yourself and have some type of exposure. Oftentimes people look at it like, does your image and identity matter, right? Does it matter? If it matters, does your reputation matters? And oftentimes people look at it like, well, if you need to start a nonprofit group, how do you want to give the good exposure? How do you want to brand it, right? How do you know where you're going to get these folks to come in and say, you know what, I believe in your mission, I see your vision, and I want to help you. And for a while, and I can speak of, because I've been a part of several nonprofit groups. I'm still a part of several nonprofit groups. Yes. And I'm going to speak about one, right? Like Special Olympics. I've been a part of Special Olympics for about 15 years. Wow. And in the past, how many years right before COVID, we became accredited. And we're now part of the Special Olympics, Asia Pacific region, which is the international. And Guam has gone itself into that realm where website needs to be integrated with social media. And now a lot of our private companies locally that has been a part of it wants to be more part, be more part of the organization and have other businesses take part of it through web, like, hey, can I donate on your website? How do I get in contact with you folks besides seeing you on Instagram and social media? So, we really look at, branding, exposure
Mhm.
for your nonprofits and where it is and integrated within your website. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about is why some nonprofits don't think that websites are useful, and why it's very key and it's important reasons why you do need a website, right? Um, it websites allows you to tell a story, tells a
Mhm.
story about the nonprofit groups, and it shows the people, behind the scenes and what the nonprofit group is about.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like, with, one of the nonprofits groups is all about images and pictures, and what they do behind the scenes and how their performances here on Guam. And so utilizing that and having an actual web component of it is very good.
Mhm.
And people say, well, Jerry, uh it's hard, websites are hard. It's not like that anymore. Then we're going to talk about the differences in websites. We're going to talk about having the difference between having us assist you versus self-service sites.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, what self-service sites, like other sites like Wix and GoDaddy. We want to recognize all the benefits and positive aspects with other products and services that are being presented to you. And
Yeah.
it just needs to be discussed. How does that weave into your nonprofit? Are
Yeah.
you a type of person that are you willing to build your site?
Mhm.
Fantastic. Or are you one that says, I don't have enough time, or I
Yeah.
don't know where to begin and how to do it? That's where we explain the simple steps and what we can do. And these are some of the things that we would like to explain to our, when we talk about during the conference, just little ticklers and what they need to know.
Yes, and that's so like good on what you're saying because I've been both. Like I've tried to build up my own website and then like after weeks of like pulling my hair and crying, it's like, no, I can't. But at least, I love though being able to handle some things on the back end, but being able to have somebody like design, or if I need to be like, how do I do this page or like update it? I think it's always good for somebody in the nonprofit or if you're a nonprofit consultant just to understand some of it, because some of it you can just like little quick updates or changing things easy. But other things, it's like, yeah, it can look a mess. And not only that, it can take your time where that's not your genius work, right? Like your genius work is writing grants or it's, going after fundraising or whatever it is, right? And if you're stuck in the weeds of trying to do this huge learning curve of a website, it can really throw you off. So I do like there's people like you that have these businesses where people can tap into it and be like, oh my gosh, that's so much easier now to do.
Right.
But I think it's also important, like you said, like there's so many benefits of websites. So do you absolutely need to have one as a nonprofit consultant? I always say not right away, but eventually I want to see that. Even as a nonprofit, I actually think it's a little more urgent for a nonprofit to have a website than a nonprofit consultant. All right. So because if you're a nonprofit consultant, you may only need 5 clients for the year to make an income, and that's all you need, right? It's not like you have to be out in the ether so much. You could get those referrals. As a nonprofit, you want to be accepting donations, you want to be creating a community, you need to have more of a mass audience, right? So, and to be able to communicate and social media, like you said, you can't just do social, it can't just do a Facebook page. I've seen that too many times. It looks funky and it's not your home. Your website's your home, and you're saying, come inside my home. And
Right.
right. And it's dedicated. There's not a million things streaming and popping up and all over the place. Like Facebook drives me crazy. It's like arcade. And I can't even concentrate in there. Whereas on a website, I can be like, what's the vibe? What are they trying to communicate? Where, you know what I mean? Like call to actions. You have more control over that. So can you kind of talk on that? Because I think it's so important.
So, and you hit a very good point. That is why with the nonprofits groups that we were a part of and we helped start it wasn't necessarily that the website was the initial thing you needed. That was really, it didn't come in till a couple of years or even after a year. And the reason is because, again, you have to start up with the branding, and whether it be a nonprofit consultant or a company that's coming in to help build for the nonprofit, you have to build your brand, your image. You got to go out and look for your volunteers. You got to see whether or not does this nonprofit work,
Yeah.
right? And oftentimes, like you talk about the content management, I met so many people. It's like, oh my God, I loved how these self-service sites, we can go in and we can pick and choose, but oh my gosh, there's like 100 templates to choose from.
Yeah.
And the minute they start and minute they input things, they're just like, wait a moment here. They get overwhelmed and they realize, you know what, this is not, they stop, they forget the password, they say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Then they end up thinking, oh my God, okay, everything that I wanted to do I'm not seeing it to come to fruition. So they end up coming back, and we were always teased that we're like the cleaners. They're like, oh my God, Jerry, can you come and fix this? Oh my God, this was so, we kept explaining that it's always best that you focus on what you want to do through your mission, and we'll take care of all the back end information that we need to push for you. And it's like, well, you know what, after, we call it like, getting yourself out of a job. Our job is to get ourselves out of this job, meaning we're setting you up, we're doing a starter kit for you. We're implementing all these things that you wanted to do based off the mission you are looking at for your nonprofit, and then we train. So
Yeah.
we're training you so that you could take over, and you'll be the CMS, the content management system. Because before, it used to be this thing called Dreamweaver, and everybody knows you needed to know code.
Mhm.
Coding was very important. So that's why everybody's like, you know what? I'm not going to touch website.
Yeah.
It's
Because
one of the things that people say, forget it. I don't want to do one. It's too complicated. But now it's very manageable and has a good understanding in how to actually go ahead and continue to maintain your site
yeah.
by, and it's very minimal. You know it, you do it, right?
Mhm.
But if it comes to we've noticed that there's a lot of our clients that still say no. You
Mhm.
still got to do the CMS, Jerry, because we found that we allow ourselves to go and focus other opportunities for our MPO and not have to struggle to work on having to take care of the website.
Yeah.
For us, it is still a priority, but the priority now it's placed on someone else that they can rely on to say our information will be constant, updated every so often and not have to worry about it. And they're able to go and focus more funding.
Yeah.
Um, we talk about this thing called freemium. I don't know if you ever heard of freemium.
Premium.
So freemium is like stuff like, uh, let's give an example. You go on a site and say, hey, you can try this particular, our app or our site for 21 days or 14 days
Or,
free,
mhm.
and then after that, then, we have these, you know, um, these packages, these premium placements that you can purchase every single month, right? And so people look at that, it's like, oh, great, that's fantastic. There's this category called premiums. Well,
Mhm.
there's always pros and cons to premiums, right? They capture you in the premium side of it, where it allows you to pay a certain amount, and you end up overwhelming yourself and saying, wait a moment, it's not what I wanted. But then
Yeah.
you're caught up into utilizing it because of the fact that all your eggs are into that basket and creating whatever site you have, versus again going back to um, tailoring it to specific companies that will give you the simplicity of small templates and doing a simple CMS, content management, back end maintenance, where it's low and it's easy to be manageable. So we're going to be talking more things about that. There's like a whole bunch of things,
So much.
yeah, that we wanted to explain. Nowadays people look at WordPress is like king, it's golden.
Mhm.
It's a gem for websites. It's easy to maintain. It's easy for folks to have simple training and understand how to utilize the back end of it. We want to talk about stuff like that, and how it can benefit you as someone who's trying to start up your website as for nonprofits. So
That's
there's
funny
a
because like WordPress to me kind of feels like Toyota's on Guam. Yes, Toyota. I was talking to my mechanic. I remember I was looking at buying another car, and he goes, you know what? Get a Toyota because every single mechanic on Guam knows how to fix them. They all got parts. He's like, if you buy that other car, that's not like a lot of people don't, all mechanics don't know how to do it, right? So I was like, oh, that's so smart. Yeah, so it's kind of like WordPress too. It's like, no matter what, if you want to have somebody else jump in, like so many people are familiar with it, so it's easier to sustain. Where if you go with some kind of like, avant-garde, whatever web builder, like it's going to be harder for people, right, to find people in the future, or just to sustain it, or updates and all of that. So I am a fan of WordPress, but I like how you're mentioning, like, let's look at these pros and cons, right? With these kind of thoughts, like Wix. I've heard a lot of people jump into Wix because they love it at first and then they hate it. And then they go to WordPress. Like there's so many stories, it's Squarespace and all of that. So, but coming back to that, I love how you talked about figuring out your branding first. Because for me, it's like I talked about, like the website's like your home. And if you understand your brand, you can really have people understand you. But if you kind of just like throw any colors out there or whatever, or fonts, or you know what I mean, it can be really confusing messaging. Or if I always say this, like I remember with some of the nonprofit consultants, they would come up with a name for their websites, and then they would put like pictures of mountains on there or something, and there was nothing to do with mountains. And I'm kind of like, what are these pictures representing? And they're like, I don't know, I just found some stock photos and put them on there. And I was like, that's really not selling what you do and can, right? So it's confusing. Can you kind of talk about that brand integration, like maybe some do's and don'ts about that real quick?
Yeah, so I'm glad, it's good that we're talking about it, because again, initially when you first start your MPO, you got to define not only your mission and vision statement, but then you got to define whether or not, how do you want your audience or the community to see you?
Mhm.
What's your driver about it, right? How do you, it's, and the thing about it is like the colors, it's like the last really thing, but oftentimes people feel that, I need to first create colors so I can have a feeling of how things are going to flow, right? And it just depends on how you would want to look at it, but realistically, it's basically looking at how do you want your audience and the community to see your nonprofit group. Let's
Mhm.
take a good example. We're going back to something like Special Olympics, right? We're not only focusing on persons with disabilities, but we're also focusing on the revolution of inclusion. And
Yes.
revolution of inclusion is not necessarily a person with disability. It's a person who's not disabled, that integrates activities and sporting events with a person with disabilities,
Mhm.
and utilizing as that as a brand, and not necessarily saying, oh, it's just persons with disabilities, right? And so we built that branding on the revolution of inclusion. And
Yeah.
that's how we wanted to see the community on Guam, is the revolution that we integrate both persons with disabilities and those that don't have disabilities, and where they can come together and have a unified sport.
Yeah.
Just like your nonprofit, you're integrating what you look at your vision of your nonprofit group and how you want it to relate to the community, because you want that community to be part of the nonprofit group some way, shape, or form, right? And when you integrate that, your brand develops
Yeah.
because you could start to, and everyone's like, oh, you need a model. Not necessarily, you don't really necessarily need a model. You need the model of how your format of your nonprofit, yes, but not a model MOTTO, but more of a MODEL, right? And so there's different avenues of like of one, again, like, it just, for me, it depends on how the group gets together and how they see their vision and mission, and what's their top priority. what what is it that you want to get out? Again, a name matters. Of course, you need your name. Again, your colors, your corporate identity, of course, is going to happen. But how do you want to brand yourself to the community? Everybody has their own set answers, whether
Yeah.
they want to brand it through, like, again, websites, social media, those are tools. Those are tools to brand,
Yeah.
your nonprofit. But how do you want to get yourself out to the community as the person that goes out there to brand it is
Yeah.
very important. You know, um, uh, the lupus, there's a lupus group of Guam that passed 10 years, and we started out with finally got ourselves a website after its 5th year, but the website was basic information and resources for those with lupus on island.
Mhm.
But in the first 5 years, it was always about outreach, trying
Mhm.
to connect to the community to understand the need for that specific nonprofit group. And they were able to build
Yeah.
it off of their connection to the community, and finding out that there's a huge percentage of people on Guam that have lupus. And so that was their driver as the way they wanted to brand themselves. They wanted to brand themselves as connecting them to understand that there's a big percentage of people in the community that have that condition, that
Right.
autoimmune disease. And
Definitely.
then from there, they came to support. They said, what can we do? These clinics come out, let's do clinic times, let's do, 1-to-1, or let's do community involvement, community meetings with people who are afflicted with autoimmune conditions. It
Mhm.
expanded more from lupus to rheumatoid arthritis. That's how people end up starting to brand themselves, right? And I've always see that that's very key. How do you, as a person who's creating this nonprofit group, go out to brand it? Because
Yeah.
you're the one that's going to brand it.
Like,
All the rest.
yeah, and you know what I like about that? Sorry to interrupt, but I love how I just want to highlight this because something you said has been actually, I've only really seen this in the last few years. So let me know what you think. But like what you said, okay, so you're looking at certain organization disabilities, right? And in the past, it seemed like a lot of the nonprofits were just showing like the need, like if you're an animal like shelter, you're just showing like like mangled dogs or whatever, like really
Yeah,
showing like grim stuff. And I think that really comes from the 80s. Like, remember the
yeah,
Sarah Silverman commercials and everything was like kind of destitute. And we're seeing a lot of like, oh, it's such a need. And now you're saying like, no, we want to see the transformation. That's what we want to showcase more, is our transformation of what we can accomplish, not just the need. Have you seen that more and more on websites then, and how people are being intentional about like, we don't want to just show how grim it is, we want to show how we can solve the problem and the
yeah.
hope. Yeah.
And that is where we have seen with the nonprofit groups that we've been a part of,
Right.
and that we've created on sites, because of the fact that it's not, like you said, not showing the dog, and the dog is out being, out in the streets and it's hungry, or the kid that hasn't, you're looking at the positivity of the kid learning, going to school.
Yeah.
um you know Showing more positivity on the actual nonprofit and what it's doing or what it would like to do would give it will be as a reason for a lot of community members out there to say, you know what, I want to put my money in there and help support, because they're showing positive movement. It's
Yeah.
all about solutions. Back in the 80s, it was always like, oh my God, there is like destitute. Oh my God, we're pleading for help.
Yeah.
Now we're showing solutions. What is that in that nonprofit group? Solution based.
Yeah.
um, we've created programs. Let's use Special Olympics as a good example. We created more programs on island than we have done ever before. We are going to expand in this specific region because of the fact that we're showing progress, inclusion, all these things that the community needed to see, which was the mission for the organization and how they wanted to brand themselves. Same thing with lupus. It's a matter of showing that the solution of, we're going to have membership meetings. We're going to come together and we're going to see what we can do to help you. Regardless if it's whether or not there's a meeting or the phone call or an email or someone connecting to the website or any of these social medias, but we're showing solutions and progress and being resourceful, and not necessarily showing that there's always resources, but being part of being of the resourceful side of it, and having proactiveness in terms of the nonprofit group, I think is very key.
Mhm.
There's so many things that we could talk about. Oh my God, we're just only talking
That's
about a small speck of branding, a small
right.
speck of how to get, because everybody else talks about all these tools and stuff that helps about branding, but if you really know and believe and truly understand what your mission and vision and how you want to have your community see this organization, then everything else is just,
It
it will
falls into
flow.
place,
Yeah, it'll
right?
be great.
Yeah,
It just, it'll find its way.
I
And
love
I
that.
just always talk about brand, and I always talk about the connecting to the community,
Mhm.
because that's very important. You have to connect with your community. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of these places and communities in small towns, it's always about connecting with your community. And
Mhm.
how do you connect with your community? The biggest driver of it all, and you can have a very simple website with
Yeah,
your name and simple information and a link on how to donate, but it's the connection to the community of it, showing the solutions and showing progress, what you would like to see or what is happening. People would want to participate. They're like, man, I want to go, go do that. Shoot,
yeah.
there's a lot of progress happening. There's a lot of benefits that's going to happen. And I want to participate. I want to volunteer. I want to donate. So there's a lot we could talk about.
Yeah, I love that too. And it doesn't matter like how complex your website is, like it can be very, like a lot of what's been popular in the last couple of years is also just doing one page landing pages, right? Where you can easily click down and see different things. I do want to just talk real quick before we wrap up on monetization on websites. So nonprofits, a lot of them, and you mentioned this in the beginning, they use it to put their donate buttons, or they're doing any kind of drives where they can also get donors. Um, how hard is it to really start getting sustainable donations on websites? Like, is there a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into creating those campaigns? Because you can't just throw a button up there and just think like everyone's going to start donating to it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's throw that out there. Right? So, like, can you kind of just talk about that briefly on like, why should every nonprofit have a donate button? And if so, like, what are some key elements that they really need to have behind it to make it work?
Well, it works both ways. For those companies that start out, for nonprofit organizations that do start up, oftentimes um, they don't have a donate button. They start off to brand themselves. They start off to first get themselves all part of the community, get their information. Because oftentimes, one, they don't know how to, they're learning the website curve of it. They're trying to establish whether or not they do we create a PayPal link?
Right.
Do I
How to
link it to
receive the funding.
my business account? And oftentimes nonprofits, they start with either little to no money, right? And so they have that option. They have that, usually they don't have a donate page just yet, because they want to brand themselves. They want to work themselves to get themselves into the community, and then they weave into a funding page based off their campaigns, based off of what they've created throughout the year in terms of what worked for them, whether it be a 5K, whether it be a book drive, whether it be a gala, whether it be a small tutoring
Mhm.
program.
Mhm.
Those things establishes themselves as part of their campaign that they go out to do within their organization, that doesn't necessarily need to have be part of the website just yet, but they're trying to build it. You have that. And then there's versus those that got grant money. Oh my goodness, I got my MPO, my nonprofit organization started up. I want to create my website. I want to create my donate page. I
Yeah.
want to really just go right to it,
Mhm.
and who has all their I's dotted, their T's crossed, and say, okay, we have the logistics and we have the manpower to
Yeah.
actually work to create an actual donation page.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things that um as a nonprofit organization, you need to differentiate what is it that you want to do now. Is your nonprofit group, do you have funding? Do you have manpower? Or
Yeah.
are you 100% volunteers?
Yeah.
If you're 100% volunteers, do you have that actual volunteer who's willing to put the time every
Mhm.
single week or month with the allotted amount of hours you need to sustain it? Or do you want to just drive it as a resource page, information for now until you gain more momentum and funding from it?
Mhm.
That's why it's the lot of nonprofit groups on island that we've assisted in terms of website didn't start off with a donation
Yeah.
page. We're a part of some nonprofit groups that
Mhm.
don't have a donation page. What we
Right.
end up doing was creating pages based off of the campaign or based off a particular event that's happening.
Mhm.
And we did it where we drove, whether ticket sales are there or sign up for the program or the event that's happening. We did it that way where it gained, and there's more information, and you were able to it'll allow the organization to get used to it and understand, okay, this is how funding would work.
Yeah.
Versus some organizations we are part of that donate page, man, it's boom, straight into the PayPal account.
Yeah.
You want to donate, this is how it's going to work. Please identify which type of program you want to donate to,
Yeah.
and it worked well for them.
Much, right? Like if you have the donate page or like just a regular donate button, then you have to think these are donors that come on. Do I have a newsletter? How do I stay up like in communication with them? How do I let them know like where their donation is going or what the impact it's had, right? So they're like, I love that you mentioned that, like, do you have the capacity to manage that? Because if somebody gives you, say, $50, $100, whatever, and you get multiple, like just on a donate button, are you getting their email address? Are you staying connected? Like those are important things to do, right? So it could start off more simple. I like that kind of, if you already have an ongoing program where you get money, like those 5Ks or whatever, you're selling tickets and you're already clean on like how that operates, that could be a way to start it and get used to it. So I really like that. But it is a way you can monetize. And most nonprofits at some point, especially in the beginning times, that you might, throw together something real quick and people will be like, how can I donate? And if you don't have a PayPal set up or a bank account set up or an easy way to collect money, that can actually, it can be like, oh my gosh, we don't even know how to collect money.
Right.
Yeah, so it is good to figure that out at some point, and a website can be a portal, right, to be able to get that or get people on your. I've even seen, recently nonprofits will be like, sign up for our newsletter and for a donation of X. Like you'll get our weekly newsletter or monthly newsletter or whatever. And it's like through like donating, you know what I mean? Like a small amount of money just to help even like pay for that capacity so that person can stay in contact. So it kind of pays for that position, which is pretty cool. So have you
Yes,
seen those things too?
yes, NPO is very important. Con Being constant and update in what's happening in the organization and filtering out to the community is very, very key. Collecting variable data is like your golden book. Like you need variable data. You
Mhm.
need variable data because if you're going to go online and you're going to start connecting to folks, whether it be website and social media or both, or emails, who are you going to send it to? How are you going to connect to the community? Are you just going to do videos? Are you going to say, okay, you can connect with us via social media? You need really good variable data, because at the end you could start having them subscribe to your newsletters. You could send them an EDD everyday mail, like sending them mail through the post office, and sending them thank you cards. Or you can invite them to certain things, whether it be on a WhatsApp or on an iMessage, and so that's why collecting variable data is important. And
Yeah.
how are these folks going to go in? You need something like a website, you need social
Yeah.
media, you need an email. That's your tools to get them in, so
Yeah.
that way they become your members. They're in a membership. Often it's like, what do you mean membership? It's like everybody who donates or volunteers to a nonprofit group, you're an automatic member
Yeah.
because you come in to help. And
Mhm.
that's
And to
out of
treat
the
them like members, treat them
yeah,
like members, yeah.
yes, and out of the kindness of your heart, you are taking that moment in time to say, I want to be a part of something. So we, as those that are behind the scenes in the nonprofit, want to say, well, you know what? Because of it, we're giving you this. This is where we're at. This is where we want to take the organization now, and we need your help. Or, if you can spread the word, and so variable data, a lot of data is very key. And it filters all the communication out there that you want to give to all your members. because that's who we are. They're your members. Even if they stop donating, you'll forever be a forever member, and that's
Uh,
what we want.
Part of the community. I love that so much. And yeah, just kind of wrap up then. I mean, we looked at ways of websites can really help, and to really start with your branding. So that always connects to your mission and vision, right? That's where it's always from, to really create your branding. And that website then is really your tool of, think of it as a communicator, right?
Right.
And then as you go through it, like also it's a way you can monetize, but it's more creating a sustainable community. Like if you think of monetization in that way, right? So you can, but make sure you're able to gather that data, like you said, email address, all of the things, so then that way you can stay in contact. Because social media, that's why you can't just do social media. Doesn't matter how many likes you get, like, I mean, that's nice, but if you're not really getting ways to stay in communication with them, it's too busy on social media. And it doesn't mean people who like your pictures will donate either, and really buy into your vision and your mission. So like having that website really has a better communication process on that, right? That's a little more clear. But man, I can't wait for this, for the webinar that we have going on in a couple of weeks. And then if you guys want to find out more data, and you're going to go more through on the must-haves and do-nots and do's for websites, more of the step-by-step approach, please join us. That's going to be so much fun. And of course, if you are thinking about starting a nonprofit consulting business, or you want to grow your nonprofit consulting business to reach out to so many nonprofits, we have the Nonprofit Consulting Conference coming up August 23rd and 24th. Aztec and Public Relations Inc. is a sponsor, so do jump on. It's a 2-day full event. I know Jerry's going to be there. We're going to have so many people on board, so many speakers to really talk about these kind of components, as far as like websites, getting your email list built up, how to do value-based pricing, all of the things that consultants need. So I'm so excited that you're part of that as well, Jerry. Super excited about our webinar too. And just, let people know, where can they find you guys? Where can they find Aztec?
Oh, you can go onto our website on aztecguam.com. Again, that's Aztec, ADZTECH Guam.com. I'm super excited. I can't wait to meet everybody online and discuss about things that we can help benefit and be solutions and just be successful for everybody. And again, I know we only touched a little minute, probably the first thing that I wanted to talk about. We ended up not speaking about the rest of the other 9 things I wanted to talk. 30 minutes is always a short time. We always could talk the whole day, but thank you again for including me and participating. And I look forward to everybody during the conference.
Yes, and definitely you guys check out the show notes for all of the links for the Nonprofit Consulting Conference, the webinar coming up, and all the things with Aztec that they're doing. So thank you again, Jerry, and I will see you soon, because we're on Guam, so we got to meet for coffee.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. You take care. Okay, bye.
Bye.